to Ultra Frontier Explorer here on alwaysaround.net. And today we have part 2 of our special feature on the New Horizons mission to fly by the dwarf planet Pluto, the king of the Kuiper Belt, which is the mysterious, never before explored region of thousands of icy worlds at the very edge of our solar system, far out beyond Neptune. New Horizons is the fastest spacecraft at launch ever, and after 9.5 years of travel away from the Sun, it flew by Pluto at a speed of over 49,000 kilometers per hour, passing within 12,500 kilometers of Pluto's surface, a little bit like threading the eye of a needle with a rifle bullet. Deep space is a hostile environment, so New Horizons is wrapped in a multi-layer foil blanket to protect it from the searing cold out at the very edge of our solar system. Underneath that, it also has a layer of Kevlar, the same material used in bulletproof vests, to protect it from impacts by micrometeorites, which could cause massive damage at such incredible speeds. The Kevlar itself is separated from the hull of the spacecraft by a series of small props, almost like toothpicks in size. The idea of this is to allow room for any micrometeorite hitting the Kevlar to flex the Kevlar layer, absorbing some of the power of impact. And then even if it breaks through the Kevlar, hopefully the micrometeorite will be broken into smaller pieces, distributing it over a wider area so that, fingers crossed, it doesn't actually punch its way right through the hull of New Horizons and damage the instrumentation inside. Now, the Sun's solar energy is too weak to power a spacecraft beyond the orbit of Jupiter, which is about 750 million kilometers away from the Sun. And as we saw in episode 4 of Ultra Frontier Explorer, part 1 of our New Horizons feature, New Horizons left Jupiter behind way back in 2007. Now, at 4.83 billion kilometers, where Pluto orbits, the Sun's radiation at what is Pluto's high noon is like a gloomy twilight here on Earth. So instead of solar panels, New Horizons had to be powered with a radioisotope thermoelectric generator, or RTG. Like a number of other extremely deep space probes before it, such as the Pioneer, Voyager and Cassini spacecraft. RTGs work by harnessing the heat generated from the radioactive decay of plutonium-238. They use thermoelectrics to directly generate electricity from this heat in what is called the Seebeck effect, and this electricity is used to run the instrumentation and computers on board the spacecraft. As an extra bonus, some of the excess heat from the RTG can be used to keep the computers and instrumentation warm enough so that they don't freeze and break. So this grand piano-sized spacecraft had to plunge through and past the Pluto system at terrific speed, twice as fast as the space shuttle used to fly. I say the Pluto system because Pluto has 5 moons. And Charon, Pluto's largest moon, which has a diameter of 1,200 kilometers and a mass 1/9 that of Pluto, is so big that its gravity means Pluto and Charon orbit around a mutual center of gravity, a barycenter, which is actually hundreds of kilometers above Pluto's surface. As you can see here from footage New Horizons beamed back earlier on its approach to the Pluto system. Because of this, Pluto and Charon can be thought of as a binary dwarf planet system, in some senses. Pluto's other moons are much further out and much smaller, more like asteroids in size. Nix and Hydra are a few tens of kilometers across and were both discovered in 2005 by the Hubble telescope. Now, Kerberos and Styx, on the other hand, are only a few kilometers in size, and they were spotted by Hubble in 2011 and 2012, by which time, of course, New Horizons was well on its way to the Pluto system. So as New Horizons approached the Pluto system, it was constantly peering ahead with its long-range camera, checking for any other undiscovered moons, because had New Horizons struck an object so much as the size of a grain of rice, travelling at such incredible speeds, that would have been enough to destroy the spacecraft. The New Horizons team carefully plotted the ship's course to get it as close as 12,500 kilometers to Pluto and within 29,000 kilometers of Charon, without colliding with any of the moons on the way in and out, even though the moons orbit each other in a complicated relationship of mutual gravitational resonances. So what's the payoff from New Horizons' epic journey? Why go to all this trouble to explore the mysterious Kuiper Belt? Good question. Well, for starters, for science! But seriously, New Horizons is packed with instruments that tell us all kinds of fascinating and useful stuff about Pluto and Charon. Both Pluto and Charon, along with the rest of the Kuiper Belt objects, are thought to have originated much closer into the Sun during the very earliest days of the solar system's formation billions of years ago. And then, as the giant planets later slowly moved outwards, Kuiper Belt objects like Pluto and Charon were pushed outwards ahead of the outermost ice giant planet, Neptune, almost as though Neptune was herding the Kuiper Belt objects outwards away from the Sun. In fact, Pluto and Charon became locked into a gravitational resonance with Neptune. So even today, Pluto's orbit around the Sun is still in resonance with Neptune's. For every 3 times Neptune goes around the Sun, Pluto orbits twice. So learning more about the composition of Pluto and Charon will provide us valuable clues as to the development of the solar system in its very earliest stages. Not to mention, this is the very first close-up exploration of the mysterious Kuiper Belt, which is a vast region of space beginning at 30 astronomical units out from the Sun and stretching all the way out to about 50 astronomical units away. Now at this point you're probably asking, what's an astronomical unit? Good question. An astronomical unit, abbreviated to AU, is the distance between the Earth and the Sun, which is roughly 150 million kilometers. So the Kuiper Belt begins at 30 AU and stretches to 50 AU. The Kuiper Belt is probably dominated by icy objects. If we look at Neptune's biggest moon, Triton, which is thought to be a captured Kuiper Belt object, we see a world with a surface of frozen nitrogen over a water ice crust that sometimes erupts in geysers of liquid and gaseous nitrogen. And deep beneath an icy mantle, Triton has a rocky core. Now, Triton's surface has a reddish colour, and this is probably due to complex hydrocarbon molecules called tholins that are formed when UV light bombards methane in Triton's very thin nitrogen atmosphere. And more about tholins in a minute. Triton's young active surface suggests internal heat, probably from radioactive isotopes in its rocky core, and also from tidal forces that tug on it as it orbits the enormous ice giant Neptune. So much so that there may be enough heat inside Triton to give it a subsurface ocean, like Jupiter's moon Europa. So, what has New Horizons discovered about Pluto and Charon so far? Well, we now have some amazing footage and photos of these two dancers in the dark. And indeed, just like Triton, Pluto is a red world, but even more so, suggesting heavy buildup of tholins on the surface, particularly in certain areas. What's more, Pluto has relatively few impact craters, which is characteristic of a young, geologically active surface. And how active that surface is, much more so than Triton. Being so far out from the sun and so cold, we might have expected Pluto to be a dull, frozen lump where nothing much ever happened. But New Horizons has now beamed back incredibly detailed images and readings of a planet with tremendous variety on its surface. There is a vast basin that contains a slowly swirling heart shape which is made of glaciers that are kilometers deep, and those glaciers are made of nitrogen and methane ice. There are even polygonal shapes within the heart shape that suggest convection currents that are very slowly churning in this nitrogen methane ice. This heart-shaped region has been named Sputnik Planum, with one lobe of it being called Tombo Regio in honor of Pluto's discoverer. Now, around the edges of Sputnik Planum, there are huge mountain ranges like the Norgay Montes, which appear to be around 3.5 kilometers high, which is 3 times higher than anything we've seen on Triton and is comparable to the Rocky Mountain range in the USA here on Earth. Now, these incredible mountains seem to be built of huge icebergs of water ice that appear to have been pushed and rafted together by the flowing action of the nitrogen and methane glaciers. And that's not all. There are at least 2 huge mountains, Wright Mons, which is about 3 to 5 kilometers high, and Picard Mons, which is 6 kilometers high, whose overall shape and the characteristic central depression at the summit strongly resemble shield volcanoes here on Earth. Wright and Picard Mons may be cryovolcanoes built up by eruptions of a slushy liquid water ice coming up through Pluto's water ice crust. It's probable that there's a considerable amount of ammonia mixed in with the water under Pluto's surface, and ammonia's antifreeze properties have helped keep it from freezing solid. So there may be a deep subsurface water ocean, effectively Pluto's magma, between Pluto's icy crust and its rocky core. Now, Pluto's 248-year-long orbit is a very stretched or very eccentric ellipse, and it spends a lot of time so far away from the sun that its thin, mostly nitrogen atmosphere freezes out as snow. But when New Horizons flew by, Pluto was close enough to the sun that nitrogen was continuously sublimating from the awesome glaciers of Sputnik Planum and formed an atmosphere that extended to a height of 300 kilometers above the planet. As well as nitrogen, there's also methane and carbon monoxide in Pluto's high, thin atmosphere. Now, the action of UV light on these gases causes the production of the complex organic hydrocarbon molecules called tholins. It's these tholin particles that are suspended in the atmosphere which cause Rayleigh scattering, which gives Pluto an extraordinary blue sky when seen in silhouette. When the tholin particles eventually sink to the surface, they cause the red colour which is seen across much of Pluto. And where they accumulate very deeply, they create very dark areas like the ominous looking Thulu Regio. What's more is that some of Pluto's atmosphere, stripped away by the solar wind, is probably captured by the gravity of its giant companion moon, Charon. Now, New Horizons did not detect nitrogen and methane on Charon itself, which has a geologically young water ice surface with very few craters. However, there's a large dark red area called Mordor at one of Charon's poles that is almost certainly coated with tholins. The theory is that some nitrogen and methane emitted from Pluto is caught and freezes at Charon's pole and then later is sublimated, giving Charon a temporary atmosphere, which UV can convert some of into tholins, and very gradually over millions and millions of years, this gives Charon its red hat of Mordor. Now, Charon presents us with questions and potential answers. It's obviously been subject to violent geological processes. Just look at that enormous canyon system, which is as deep as the Grand Canyon on Earth. Where do Pluto and Charon get the heat for all this activity? Way out at the frozen edge of the solar system. There's no gas giant planet here to provide the kind of tidal forces that help heat Io, Europa and Ganymede as they orbit Jupiter. There's not even an ice giant like Neptune, whose gravity creates tidal forces in Triton. However, it's likely that there's some heat still in the interior of both Pluto and Charon from radioactive isotopes. And what's more, there would have been a large conversion of potential energy to heat when Pluto and Charon mutually gravitationally captured one another in the dim and distant past. In fact, there's still some debate as to whether or not Pluto and Charon first collided with each other in a giant impact before settling into their mutual orbits. I've mentioned tholins a few times now because they may play a very important role in evolution. It's possible that these molecules may have been precursors contributing to the formation and sustenance of early life on Earth. Even today, some microorganisms on Earth can live solely from tholins. What's even more intriguing is that experiments in the laboratory simulating the atmospheres of planets like Pluto or moons like Triton or Titan with nitrogen, methane and carbon monoxide subject to UV radiation didn't just generate what's been referred to as star tar, these sort of long chain hydrocarbon molecules. They also generated biologically important molecules, specifically all 4 of the nucleobases in the DNA of life on Earth, and what's more, 2 of the simple amino acids found in the proteins of life on Earth. Now, when you consider that, and you also consider how active Pluto is, and the possibility that there may be a liquid water ocean under its surface, this does raise the intriguing idea that potentially some of those tholins created on the surface may, through the various resurfacing processes that are occurring, actually end up effectively subducted into this water ice ocean, at which point we have biological precursor molecules in liquid water, which in terms of evolution is a very interesting situation indeed. Now, even though New Horizons is still busy beaming back the vast amount of data from the Pluto flyby to us here on Earth, and will still be doing that for another 6 or 7 months, obviously it didn't slow down when it passed through the Pluto system and is still traveling outwards at 49,000 odd kilometers per hour. So the New Horizons team has already made a course correction, thruster burn, to aim the little spacecraft at its next target, a 45-kilometer wide Kuiper Belt object called 2014 MU69, or MU69 for short, which lies 1 billion miles deeper out in the deep darkness of the solar system's outer edge, the twilight zone of the Kuiper Belt. And New Horizons will reach this next mysterious world on January the 1st, 2019.